The morning my gate wouldn't open, I thought it was a mechanical failure. It wasn't. It was deliberate. And it was sitting right in front of me. A pearl-white $100,000 luxury SUV parked sideways across my private ranch entrance like it owned the land. It didn't. I did. The badge on the grille shimmered in the sunrise. Custom rims. Dealer plates still polished. It screamed money. It also screamed entitlement. Because behind that wheel, stepping out with oversized sunglasses and a clipboard, was Linda Carver, HOA president, self-appointed ruler of anything she could see from her kitchen window. She smiled like she'd just won something. "You can't close this gate," she announced. I looked at her, then at the SUV, then back at her. "Good morning to you too." For context, I own 42 acres just outside the manicured boundaries of the Maple Brook Estates HOA. My land has been in my family for 3 generations. Cattle, storage barns, a private access road, and yes, a heavy steel gate installed last month. That gate changed everything. Because for years, HOA residents had been accidentally using my gravel road as a shortcut to avoid the main exit traffic light. I tolerated it at first. Then came the trash, the tire ruts, the complaints about dust blowing toward their homes. Complaints about my dirt on my land. So I locked the gate. Legally. Properly. With survey documentation and county approval. Apparently, that offended Linda. "You're blocking community access," she said, tapping her clipboard dramatically. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm blocking trespassing." She laughed. Actually laughed. "This road has been used by our residents for over 10 years. And it's been privately owned for over 70. That's when her expression hardened. "You can't just decide to shut it down." "I can." And I did. What I didn't realize was that she'd planned this little performance. Within minutes, 2 more HOA board members pulled up behind her SUV, parking along the side like backup dancers. One of them started filming on his phone. Linda crossed her arms. "We're not moving until you open it." I blinked. "You're blocking my only equipment entrance." "Correct." She said it proudly, like she'd just declared war. Here's what she didn't know. The only equipment entrance wasn't just for tractors. I had a scheduled livestock delivery that morning. 40 head of cattle arriving in less than an hour. A transport truck that absolutely could not sit idling on the county road because an HOA president decided to cosplay as a traffic cone. I checked my watch. Then I checked my patience. Both were running thin. "Move the vehicle," I said evenly. "No. You're trespassing. This is a shared-use access route. It's a private agricultural easement." She tilted her head smugly. "Prove it." That was her first mistake. I walked back to my truck, pulled out a laminated survey map, and handed it to her. Highlighted boundary lines. County seal. Recorded easement terms. Her smile flickered. But pride is a stubborn thing. She handed it back without reading more than a second. "We'll let the HOA attorney decide." I nodded slowly. "Great." Then I pulled out my phone. She smirked when she saw me dialing. "Calling the sheriff?" "No." Her confidence didn't waver. Until she heard what I said next. "Hi, this is Daniel Wright. I need a heavy recovery crane dispatched to private property. Oversized obstruction removal." Her sunglasses lowered slightly. She hadn't expected that. "You can't tow my vehicle," she snapped. "It's not a tow," I corrected calmly. "It's a lift." One of the board members stopped filming. "Wait, what?" I turned the screen toward them. Property deed. Survey overlay. Clear as day. This wasn't HOA land. This wasn't shared access. This was mine. And right now, her 6-figure SUV was illegally blocking a commercial agricultural delivery. Which meant damages. Which meant liability. "You wouldn't dare," Linda hissed. I met her eyes. "Try me." 25 minutes later, the low rumble of diesel engines echoed down the county road. Not the cattle truck. Something bigger. Something louder. And something with a telescopic boom arm long enough to make her luxury SUV look like a toy. The crane operator stepped out, chewing gum casually. "Which one's the obstruction?" he asked. I pointed, and that's when Linda Carver realized. She probably should have just moved the car. Before we go any further, if you enjoy watching entitled HOA Presidents Learn Expensive Lessons the Hard Way, make sure you subscribe because this crane operation, it was just the beginning. And what happened next cost her a lot more than pride. The crane operator walked slowly around Linda's SUV like a surgeon assessing a complicated procedure. Pearl white paint, chrome trim, custom suspension. He gave a low whistle. Nice ride, he said. Shame it's parked where it shouldn't be. Linda stepped forward immediately. You are not touching this vehicle. The operator didn't even look at her. I don't touch, he said calmly. I lift. By now, a small audience had formed. HOA board members. 2 curious residents. And unfortunately for Linda, the cattle transport truck had just arrived, idling loudly behind the growing spectacle. 40 head of cattle inside. On a schedule. The driver leaned out his window. You gonna clear this gate or what? I checked my watch again. We're working on it. Linda turned to the truck driver. You can't come through here. This road is community access. The driver looked at me. I held up the deed. He looked back at her. Lady, he said flatly, I just move cows. The crane operator unfolded the stabilizers. Metal legs extended to the gravel. Hydraulics hissed. The boom arm slowly began to rise. That's when Linda's confidence cracked just slightly. You'll scratch it, she warned. Not if you stop talking, he replied. One of the HOA board members stepped closer to her and whispered something urgent. Probably liability. Probably insurance. Probably the realization that this was no longer a bluff. Linda marched toward me. This is harassment. No, I said calmly. This is obstruction removal. You can't just escalate like this. You blocked a commercial access point. You're being dramatic. You're being towed. The crane operator carefully positioned industrial straps beneath the SUV's frame. Precision. Experience. Zero emotion. The steel cable tightened. The vehicle's suspension shifted slightly. Linda gasped. You damaged that car, and I'll sue you personally. I smiled faintly. You're currently trespassing and interfering with agricultural operations. She froze. Because now the witnesses were hearing legal words. Big ones. Trespassing. Interference. Commercial damages. The boom lifted. Slowly. Deliberately. For expensive tires left the gravel at the same time. The SUV hovered in the air like a confused, overpriced ornament. The cattle truck driver actually laughed. One of the residents muttered, "Oh my God." Linda's face turned a shade that matched her brake lights. You can't humiliate me like this. You parked sideways across my gate, I replied. Gravity did the rest. Now here's where it gets interesting. The crane operator didn't just swing the vehicle to the side of the road. He followed my instructions precisely. Set it down, I said, pointing right there. Where's there? He asked. Public shoulder. County line marker 18. Which meant one important thing. Once her vehicle touched that pavement, it was no longer on my property. It was on county land, blocking a public shoulder. Illegally. As the SUV was lowered gently onto the roadside, a new sound entered the scene. Sirens. Linda's head snapped toward the highway. Oh, good, she muttered. Now we'll settle this. She assumed I had called law enforcement. I hadn't. The cattle driver had. Commercial vehicles don't like delays. And they definitely don't like drama. 2 sheriff's deputies pulled up. They stepped out slowly, surveying the situation. Crane. Cattle truck. SUV on the shoulder. Crowd of HOA members looking like they'd just watched a live episode of something they didn't sign up for. One deputy approached me. You the property owner? Yes, sir. He nodded. And that vehicle was blocking my private agricultural gate. He turned to Linda. Ma'am, is this your vehicle? Yes, she said sharply. And he had no right to. The deputy held up a hand. Is it your vehicle? Yes. And were you blocking access to private property? It's a shared. Ma'am. Silence. The second deputy walked over to the SUV and examined its new position. Then he looked at the county line marker. Then at his partner. Then back at Linda. "You're also parked illegally on a public shoulder." Her mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again. This was no longer about HOA authority. This was about traffic violations. The deputy took out his ticket book. That small motion changed everything. "You're issuing me a citation?" she asked in disbelief. "Yes, ma'am." "For what?" "Obstruction and improper parking."
She pointed at me.
"He orchestrated this." The deputy shrugged slightly. "You chose not to move." The fine wasn't astronomical, but the embarrassment? That was priceless. Because at that exact moment, one of the residents who had been filming earlier was still filming. And the video captured everything. The lift, the hover, the citation. Linda Carver, HOA president, arguing with law enforcement beside her dangling luxury SUV. As the deputies finished up, the cattle truck finally rolled through my open gate. 40 head of livestock safely delivered. Business resumed. Calm restored. Almost. Because Linda wasn't done. She walked up to me one last time, her voice low and shaking with contained rage. "This isn't over." I nodded. I didn't think it was. And as the crane packed up and drove away, leaving her SUV dusty and ticketed on the roadside, I realized something important. Blocking my gate had cost her a fine. But challenging my property rights? That was about to cost her a lot more. By sunset, the video was everywhere. One of the residents had uploaded it to the neighborhood Facebook group with a caption, "HOA President versus Crane. Guess who won?" By midnight, it had thousands of views. By morning, it had reached the entire county. And Linda Carver was trending for all the wrong reasons. The footage was brutal. Clear angle of her SUV being lifted. Her shouting. The deputy writing the citation. And my calm voice in the background saying, "It's private property." Over and over. Private property. That phrase became the headline. The HOA emergency meeting was called within 48 hours. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. But I heard about it from 3 separate neighbors. Apparently, half the community was furious. Not at me, but at her. Because the board had been warned. Multiple times. The road was not HOA land. The easement documents had been reviewed years ago. And Linda had ignored them.
Why?
Because she didn't like losing convenience. What she failed to consider was liability. When you block a commercial agricultural entrance and delay a livestock delivery, you create financial exposure. When that livestock delivery includes contracts and timed health inspections, the stakes rise. And when the obstruction is intentional, it stops being a misunderstanding. It becomes interference. 3 days after the crane incident, I received a certified letter. Not from the HOA. From their attorney. The tone was very different this time. No demands. No threats. Just a request to discuss mutual road usage agreements. Interesting. Very interesting. Because just last week I was apparently powerless. Now, they wanted to negotiate. I forwarded the letter to my attorney.
Yes.
I have one. When you manage agricultural land, you don't rely on handshakes. You rely on documentation. And documentation was about to become Linda's biggest problem. My attorney did something simple, but devastating. He sent a formal notice of intent to pursue damages for commercial delivery delay, operational interference, public defamation, based on Linda's statements claiming shared access, and trespass. The HOA board went silent after that. Dead silent. Meanwhile, the county got involved. Because the video didn't just show a crane lifting an SUV. It showed an HOA president falsely claiming authority over land outside HOA boundaries. That caught attention. The county zoning office reviewed Maple Brook Estate's original filings. Guess what they found? The HOA boundary maps distributed to residents were outdated. Conveniently extended. Just enough to imply control over my access road. Not legally, but visually. That's not a small mistake. That's misrepresentation. Within a week, a second letter arrived. This one marked urgent. The HOA board had scheduled a formal review hearing. And for the first time since Linda became president, Her position was under official scrutiny. She tried one last move. She filed a complaint with the county claiming my gate violated community aesthetic standards. That would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. The county response? My property is not part of the HOA.
Case closed.
Attempt denied. Strike 2. Then came strike 3. A homeowner within Maplebrook Estates filed a records request. They wanted to see all legal opinions Linda had received regarding my road. There weren't any, because she never asked for one. She acted without counsel, without vote authorization, without insurance notification. Alone. Arrogance is expensive, but isolation? That's fatal in politics. 2 weeks after the crane incident, another meeting was held. This one mandatory. Full attendance. And this time, Linda didn't sit at the center of the table. She sat at the side, listening, while the board's attorney explained something very slowly and very clearly. The HOA does not own the agricultural access road.
Pause.
It never has. Longer pause. And the recent actions have exposed the association to potential legal liability. The room reportedly went quiet. Very quiet. A vote was called. Not on the road. On Linda. Whether she had acted within her authority. Whether she had damaged the association. Whether she should remain president. The vote wasn't unanimous. But it didn't need to be. She lost. She didn't storm out. She didn't argue. She simply gathered her papers and left. No dramatic speech. No apology. Just the echo of heels down a hallway she once controlled.
You'd think that would be the end.
Gate restored. SUV humiliated. President removed.
Case closed.
But here's the thing about people who try to control land that isn't theirs. They rarely stop at embarrassment. They escalate. And 3 days after losing her position, Linda filed a personal lawsuit against me, claiming emotional distress, property endangerment, and public humiliation. I read the complaint twice. Then I laughed. Because if she wanted a courtroom, I was more than ready to bring the crane receipts. When I got served the lawsuit papers, I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset roll over the back pasture. The process server looked almost apologetic. Mr. Wright? That's me. He handed me the envelope like it weighed more than it did. It didn't. But the accusations inside were heavy with desperation. Linda Carver was suing me personally. Not the crane company. Not the county.
Me.
For intentional infliction of emotional distress, reckless endangerment of private property, and my personal favorite, public humiliation resulting in reputational damage. I actually read that line twice. Public humiliation. As if gravity had singled her out unfairly. My attorney, Mark Delaney, didn't laugh. He smiled. The slow, patient kind of smile that means someone just made a strategic mistake. This is reactionary, he said, flipping through the complaint. She's trying to shift narrative. Will it work? He shook his head. Not if facts still exist. Here's the thing about lawsuits. They require evidence. And evidence doesn't care about ego. Mark filed a response within days. Attached to it, video footage, property deed records, county boundary maps, livestock delivery contracts showing financial exposure, and sworn statements from the deputies confirming she refused multiple requests to move her vehicle. It wasn't a counterpunch. It was a demolition plan. Then Mark did something Linda absolutely didn't expect. He filed a counterclaim for trespass, for interference with commercial operations, and for defamation, citing her repeated public claims that I was illegally restricting community access. Now the stakes weren't emotional. They were financial. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No TV-style theatrics. Just fluorescent lighting and legal precision. Linda sat beside her attorney, posture rigid. Gone were the oversized sunglasses. Gone was the clipboard authority. Now she looked smaller. Her attorney opened by arguing that the crane lift was excessive force. Mark stood calmly when it was our turn. Your Honor, he began, if someone parks a vehicle across your private driveway and refuses lawful requests to move, removal is not aggression. It is remedy. The judge nodded slightly. Encouraging. The video was played again. Different room. Different audience. Same result. The moment where she says, "We're not moving." The moment the deputy asks if it's her vehicle. The moment she admits it. Intent matters. And hers was documented in high definition. Then came the part that shifted everything. Mark introduced the livestock contract. 40 head of cattle, he said clearly. Time delivery. Veterinary inspection window. Commercial penalty clauses for delay. He let that hang in the air. Her refusal to move exposed my client to measurable financial loss. Linda's attorney shuffled papers.
But there was no counter to that.
Because it was true. When Linda took the stand, the confidence she once wore like armor was gone. "Did you believe you had authority over that road?" her attorney asked. "Yes." "Based on what legal document?" Silence. She hesitated. Community usage history. Mark stood. "Usage does not equal ownership, correct?" She didn't answer immediately. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Carver." "Correct." Then Mark delivered the final blow. "Were you informed, prior to the incident, that the road was privately owned?" Another pause. "Yes." "And you chose to block it anyway?" "Yes." The courtroom air tightened. Because that wasn't a misunderstanding. That was willful. The judge didn't take long. "In matters of property law," he said carefully, "self-assumed authority does not supersede recorded ownership." He glanced at Linda. "Refusal to move after notification constitutes trespass." Then at me. "Removal of obstruction was lawful."
Her claim was dismissed.
Entirely. But the counterclaim? That was different. The judge ruled she was personally liable for court costs, my legal fees, commercial delay compensation, and a civil penalty for willful trespass. It wasn't a $1 million verdict. But it didn't need to be. Because the ruling did something more permanent. It established legal record, that she had knowingly overstepped.
Twice.
Outside the courthouse, reporters asked if I felt vindicated. I kept it simple. Property rights aren't optional. That clip circulated just as fast as the crane video. Maybe faster. Within a month, Linda listed her house. Quietly. No neighborhood farewell. No community statement. Just a realtor sign and drawn curtains. Because once you lose authority publicly and legally, it doesn't come back. But here's the real twist. The HOA board reached out again. This time, not to argue, not to negotiate shortcuts, but to request something formal. A recorded, permanent access agreement for emergency-only use of the road. With compensation. With liability clauses. With respect. And I agreed. Because I was never against cooperation. I was against control. Linda tried to block my gate. Instead, she lifted her own reputation into the air for everyone to examine. And when it came back down, it didn't land gently. By the time summer settled in, the dust had literally and figuratively cleared. The gate still stood exactly where it always had, steel, locked, unbothered. But something else had changed. The silence. Not the peaceful kind. The respectful kind. The new HOA president, a quiet accountant named Harris, scheduled a meeting with me at a neutral location, the county office. No dramatic entrances. No surprise blockades. Just paperwork and a handshake. "We'd like to formalize emergency access only," he said carefully. "Fire, medical, utility. No resident shortcuts." "And liability?" I asked. "Fully assumed by the association." "And compensation?" He slid the proposal across the table. "Annual easement fee. Maintenance, contribution. Written acknowledgement of private ownership." It was everything Linda refused to admit, now signed in ink. We recorded the agreement with the county. Stamped.
Filed. Permanent.
The road was no longer a gray area in anyone's imagination. It was legally defined. And that matters. Because clarity prevents conflict. Ego creates it. As for Linda, her house sold below asking. Word travels in suburban neighborhoods. Especially when court rulings are public record. She moved out quietly. No farewell post. No final speech. Just a moving truck at sunrise and a closed chapter. The crane operator actually stopped by a month later. Not for drama. Just passing through on another job. He looked at the gate and laughed. Still holding strong? Stronger than ever, I said. He nodded toward the road. You know, that video made the rounds in our dispatch group. Oh, yeah, he grinned. We titled it Luxury Lift. We both laughed. Because time has a way of turning tension into legend. The cattle deliveries continued without interruption. Business stabilized. No more tire tracks from impatient commuters. No more HOA notices taped to fence posts. Just routine.
And peace.
Which was all I wanted in the first place. One evening, I stood by the gate as the sun dipped low across the pasture. The steel bars cast long shadows across the gravel. That gate wasn't about keeping people out. It was about defining boundaries. And boundaries aren't hostile. They're healthy. Looking back, I realized something important. Linda never really wanted the road. She wanted control. Control over convenience. Control over optics. Control over land she didn't own. But property law doesn't bend to personality. It responds to documentation. And documentation won. People still mention it sometimes. At the feed store. At the county office. You're the crane guy, right? I don't correct them. I just smile. Because it was never about humiliating someone. It was about standing firm when someone tried to rewrite reality. If she had simply moved her SUV that morning, none of this would have happened. No crane. No citation. No lawsuit. No resignation. But pride parked sideways across common sense. And gravity handled the rest. The final invoice for her court-ordered payments cleared in early fall. No delays. No appeals. Just compliance. Which is ironic. Because compliance is what she demanded from everyone else. Until the law demanded it from her. The gate still opens every morning at 6 a.m. The cattle trucks still roll through on schedule. And the road remains exactly what it always was. Private. Documented.
Mine.
HOA presidents come and go. Board members rotate. Neighborhood politics shift. But ownership? Ownership doesn't trend. It doesn't negotiate under pressure. And it doesn't move just because someone blocks it with a six-figure SUV. She tried to make a statement by parking across my entrance. Instead, she created a record. A public, legal, undeniable record. And the next time someone thinks about testing that gate, they won't remember the argument. They'll remember the crane. And that's more than enough.